Hello everyone, and welcome to another video here on RPGs with Paddy. I'm Paddy. So today we're going to be continuing the new Game Master month, and this will be entry 4 out of 8 to prepare us for running our first game in our chosen system. There's still plenty of time to join if you want. Check out the link in the description. I will be documenting my progress here through RuneQuest, Trail of Cthulhu, and Numenera. But the website also provides guidance for Unknown Armies, Delta Green, and Monster of the Week. Don't worry if you can't keep up exactly to the schedule. You can use it freely. And it's always good to start it when you have the time to do it properly. I believe all of the posts will stay up on the website until the end of December, and then they will start again in January 2024. Anyway, as I said, this is task 4 of 8, so we're already halfway there. Good work. Today's entry is going to be mostly about the adventure or scenario we are going to run. So, let's get into it. So, here on the website, we can see we're going to talk briefly about creating your own adventure. And this is often one of the most satisfying and fun parts about being a GM. But for this course, we're going to be running published adventures intended for beginners. So this is great to get you started, and then you can keep going with published adventures, or you can start creating your own, or a mixture of the two. I think it's really fun both ways. Published adventures have usually been play tested a lot, and are of a certain quality usually, and creating your own allows you to flex your creative skill as well. So both of them are really good. Of course, when you're playing a published adventure, always feel free to change it and add in anything that you would like to add to it, because that makes it a little bit more your own. So basically on this website, they're going to talk about what things most adventures have in common. So there's usually a setup with some kind of hook for the players to get interested in it. Then there might be some conflict that compels the players to become involved. After that, we should have an outline for how the story is likely to play out. So this can be quite a rigid system. After A, they go to B. After B, they go to C. After C, they go to D. Or it can be more flexible and vague, saying, here are a number of things that might happen in the story depending on the player's actions. Generally, it's good to stay quite flexible because you never know how your players are going to react. And we want to give them the freedom to explore it as well. It's not just telling a story, telling your story, but it's collective, collaborative storytelling. After that, in the adventure, we should also get a kind of a set of encounters or scenes. And these can involve combat, traps, social interaction, exploration, anything like that. And finally as well, an adventure should contain information about the creatures or the characters likely to be met during the adventure. Down a little bit below that, they give points for what they think makes a great adventure. So they suggest there should be an element of mystery or a plot twist, or when you complete this, you reach your goal, it turns out that that was only the tip of the iceberg. There should also be a story element to it. It's not just a random bunch of encounters, but it has a story element to it. But it doesn't railroad the players. So railroading, if you're new to RPGs, is a term you will come across a lot, which is similar to what I mentioned above, where basically the players' choices don't matter. It's going to go, A is going to happen, and then B is going to happen, and then C is going to happen. And there's no choice there. It just happens, no matter what you try and do. Even if you think that sounds like a bad idea, how about we do this? It's like, no, you have to do that. That's called railroading, and it takes away the player's choice, basically. And it's as if you are just telling your own story. So we want there to be a story there but for it to be flexible enough that it can change based on the player's choices. And we'll go into that a little bit, especially in the Trail of Cthulhu version of this video. They give some great information, so check that out. Anything else? Yes, there's usually a variety of different encounter types, so that they're not all just combat. So there should be combat, there should be social interaction, exploration, just a variety of those, so that it's not just combat and then combat and then combat. And then finally, the last part they talk about is that it plays to the interests of the players in your group and also to the characters that the players are playing. So some adventures may be great for one group who love combat. It's a very combat heavy encounter. This group will love it. But another group might hate the adventure because they want to have more social intrigue. And equally, this social intrigue adventure that they want might be bad for those. So you have to kind of talk to your group a little bit and just get a feel and kind of set the expectation for what is going on here. Usually, the first adventure that you play is usually going to be a one-shot that you complete in one evening or one session. And usually you can be fairly free with that because the players are also learning it for the first time. But ideally, you would include a variety of combat, social interaction, exploration, other things like that. And then you can get player feedback on what parts did they like, what would they like to see more of, and what parts did they not like, they want to see less of. Certain things like combat, especially in RuneQuest, combat is a little bit more complicated. And the first time players go through it, it might be a little bit, it might drag a little bit, it might seem a little bit too complicated. So you want to make sure that it's not just the growing pains. If they say, I don't like the combat in RuneQuest, for example, make sure that it's not just the growing pains of that as they're learning the system. So maybe try that a few different scenarios before you try to get rid of combat. So I really thought I had already recorded this, but I can't find anything. So I'm having lots of technical trouble getting these videos out for Thursday. But basically for Trail of Cthulhu, we have two things to do. The first thing is to go through the Trail of Cthulhu rulebook, just about 10 pages here, just kind of talking about how to bring a scenario together, the general rules. And after that, I'll have a look through the scenario for the first 13 pages of it anyway, kind of giving us an overview of Midnight Sub Rosa. That one I have already finished and I've edited that, so it'll be coming up soon. So anyway, in this section called Putting It All Together, we get some tips for players first, including the core idea of believing you might succeed. So this is a horror game, and you will be going up in certain cases against mythos horrors that you have no realistic chance of beating. But don't be paralyzed by fear so that you end up doing nothing. Will something horrible happen if you open that door? Yeah, of course, probably. But that's part of the fun. So think about how your character will face the challenges and be a bit of a hero type. Don't just think about how realistic your choice is. Rather think about what is an interesting choice in this situation, and then think of a way to make it realistic for your character. Why would your character do this? Especially you should look to your drive as reasons for and inspiration for doing these things. So we haven't, in this course, we haven't gone through drives just yet because we haven't really gone through character creation. So don't worry about that. It's just something that, the drive of your character, something that pushes them forward. So if for players still, if you don't seem to have enough information, look for more clues and talk to a lot of people. Talking to witnesses is an excellent sort of clue. Don't only think we have to look for physical clues. These interpersonal clues can be really important. They can sometimes be the most important as well. But also don't drag out scenes too much looking for 100% of the clues. Remember, there should be one major clue per scene. Don't feel like you have to turn over every single stone after you've already found a major clue in that scene. Follow that clue to the next scene, and once you're kind of gathering all of the main clues, and if at that point you get stuck, a lot of these places you can revisit as well. So then we move on to tips for the keepers. So there is some information here for designing your own scenario. You don't need to know that now, but the structure here is great for making your own, but also for following published adventures. So I'm pretty sure all of the published Trail of Cthulhu adventures follow this structure with 3 core points: the hook, the horrible truth, and then the trail of clues. So the hook is going to be, here we are. So the hook is going to be some kind of hook. It is an item or an event or an encounter that kind of drags the investigators into the mystery. The horrible truth explains to the keeper what is going on behind the scenes. So before you read the scenario, you have an idea, you know the kind of the core idea of what is going on. And then the trail of clues is a number of clues that will lead your players from the hook to understanding the horrible truth. And that's essentially all you need for a mystery game. You can also add in things like antagonist reactions, which is how the antagonists are going to react to whatever the players are doing. So they're not just idly sitting around waiting for people to catch up with them. So there is also a section here about structuring the adventure. And so I think it's a little bit kind of confusing at the start. But I would say come back and look at this after running Midnight Sub Rosa so you have a better understanding about how to structure those things. I would always recommend the first time you're playing a game, run an introductory published scenario. And after that, of course, you can branch out and do your own original ones. So down here, we hear something about floating core clues, and I think this is a great idea. These are some clues that could be found in one of multiple locations, depending on what the investigators do. While a normal clue usually leads from scene to scene, a floating clue usually leads from a section to another section. So from an Act 1 to an Act 2, for example, so similar to like a stage play. So this allows you to move from section to section more freely depending on the flow of the game. It can help avoid player frustration if they just can't solve something. It's not like, but they have to go here to find that clue. No, this clue could be in a variety of places as well. And it can also help you skip unnecessary scenes if the players have already kind of gathered all of the core clues. You don't need to worry about that because we'll be running a published adventure here as well. Another thing, though, which is important is leveraged clues. So this is the idea that a witness might be totally silent when they're interrogated. But when some new evidence is put in front of them that, incriminates them, they might suddenly confess everything to get, better conditions or whatever. But this is an idea that the players should know about as well. Some clues you can only get if you have access to previous clues called prerequisite clues. But again, a lot of this is about creating your own one as well. There's a little bit of information here about NPC stats. But again, I wouldn't worry too much about that because we're, again, running the published adventure. So when it comes time to use an ability, you should think about the consequences of failure. This is, and I've said it many times already, this is the core idea of Trail of Cthulhu. If the consequence of failure is that a character fails to get a piece of crucial information, success should be automatic. That means there will not be a roll. Well, I'm sorry, I said automatic, provided that the character has the ability in question and the player thinks to ask for it. So if you have a piece of information, and I think, yeah, it's here as well. If you have a piece of information that offers a fun sidelight on the action, but is not essential to move through the story, you can make this available with a 1 or 2 point spend. And as always throughout the game, focus on drama rather than realism. So there's an excellent sidebar here about using the Cthulhu Mythos ability as well, and some examples for how you could use it as well listed here. So just what they say here is when a player tries to use the Cthulhu Mythos skill, they are indicating one or both of two things. He wants a big hint to the mystery and is willing to pay for it because, accessing Cthulhu Mythos is dangerous. Or he wants to confirm his deductions and roleplay some juicy Lovecraftian madness. The keeper should oblige on both fronts. So this is really giving you the opportunity for a lot of role-playing there as well. So another thing as well here that they say is if you can link this horror story to some real historical events, it can make it a little bit more connected to reality, and that kind of makes it a more horrific thing as well. Of course, when you're going through this, because your players are acting as, normal people, average people, one of the reactions might be to go to the police about it. But the police and other authorities should be pretty skeptical, especially about any kind of supernatural thing. And it says here, where does it say? Successful horror depends upon a sense of isolation, whether this is geographical or social. The reassurance of a support network is poison to the sense of creeping unease that horror seeks to cultivate. So you should use 3 ideas here that they list. The police would never believe us. So, of course, if you go there, the police are never going to believe something crazy like that. The second one is the police might assume that we're responsible. The first person on the scene, if you're reporting it, maybe you're just trying to get away with it. And then the final one is very kind of isolated, really leaves you feeling like there's no help available, is that the police are in on it as well. This can be really good in kind of like small towns as well. So definitely use those kind of hints as well to kind of creep out your players and make them feel like no one's coming to help us. So now we talk about managing scenarios. So investigative stories are very structured because, there's a mystery, there's there's certain clues that have to be found to solve the mystery. But when it comes to role-playing, it can be quite difficult to achieve that structure. And it says here as well, guide the players too little and they lose the thread, resulting in a loose and sloppy narrative that provides none of the neat, order-making pleasure the genre is meant to provide. Guide them too much and they feel that their freedom of action has been taken away from them, and that they are merely observers moving through a predetermined sequence of events. This is something that kind of takes a lot of time and experience to overcome. For the moment, and for this introductory scenario, and for many scenarios after that as well, I would say just be aware of this concept, and maybe think about it between sessions as well. And you can kind of alter your GM style to kind of some scenarios when you're running it, you might be giving them too much freedom and they kind of get a little bit lost. Other ones you might be not giving them enough freedom and it feels boring because they're just essentially you're reading a story to them. Don't worry at all if you're making these kind of mistakes in your early scenarios, because that happens to all of us as well. But basically, even when there is a bit of railroading, you want to, I'll come back to this in a second, you want to kind of keep these 5 points kind of in your mind, because even when there is railroading involved, which is kind of, there is a set procedure to get through this as well, even if it's not completely determined, you should try and include these things to give the impression or the perception of narrative freedom to the players. So the 5 ones that we get here are: avoid reading right from the scenario. And now in some of the other videos, I've recommended reading through the read aloud text. I think this can be really helpful for a beginner GM at the start, just to kind of help calm the nerves. But yeah, in general, I think if you kind of have the core idea of the scenario and then you explain it in your own words, makes it appear much more unplanned and kind of reacting to what the players are saying. Don't worry about that right from the start. Read from the scenario as much as you need to at the start, and then gradually kind of ease off it as well. The second point is during scenes of character interaction, really riff with the players. So again, this is just very similar. You're not just reading pre-written reactions or giving them pre-written bits of information. It completely depends on what the players are saying to you, what kind of information they're going to get. And the next one is encourage players to flesh out the details of the setting and the situation. If they ask what the weather is like or if something is present, let them describe it. That way they are helping create the world. So another one is tailor NPCs and situations to the investigators. Make the NPCs narratively interesting to the PCs based on similar or opposite personality traits. And the final one is, and this is very important, give opportunities for the players to flesh out their investigator backstories. So anytime they have a chance to kind of talk about some experience or introduce themselves to other people or bring up some memory, look into their drive, anything like that, really helps them become a more well-rounded character, and they'll become much more involved in the game. So yeah, these 2 pages here that I've skipped are for running campaigns. So I will again skip that because we don't need that for our standalone one-shot scenario. Here though, on this page, there's we're talking about resources. So the players do have a limited number of pool points to solve the mystery, but core clues should never cost any points, so that's fine. They'll be able to solve the mystery no matter how many points they have. Apart from that, the investigative pool points is a player who says, can I spend a bureaucracy point here, is requesting something cool for his investigator to do or discover during the scene. And when the keeper says, do you want to spend an art history point here, she's signaling that there's something awesome available during the scene that she thinks the player or players would enjoy. So that's kind of like investigative pool points. But then for general pool points such as stability, health, athletics, firearms, and stuff like that, you don't want the players to have their full points by the end of the scene, because the final confrontation will not really be intimidating or horrific or scary for them. Equally, you don't want them to be completely drained of points, because then it will be too hopeless. So do keep an eye on the party's pool points and try to kind of strike that balance so they're somewhere, in the middle as well. They're not full where they'll be able to take down that the final confrontation, no problem. And they're not empty where they're like, well, there's not even any point in me rolling my dice. I'm just going to lose. So again, this is something you will learn from experience. But from the start, just, do your best. Be aware of that concept, and you will learn from experience. So in addition to providing the appearance of freedom, is providing actual freedom for the players. So don't be glued to the idea that only one person can find, that only someone who has this ability can find the clue. If any investigator describes an action that would plausibly lead them to that clue, they find it. And I think this is very important. The narrative immersive description is so much more important than just saying, I have forensic. So it may be that someone describing it finds something interesting, and then someone with forensic skills can come over and look in the microscope. Anyway, that's the idea. Anyway, that they're kind of like looking in the microscope and they're like, hey, something here looks weird, and then they get someone over with forensics who can confirm that. So because the first person didn't have the forensic skill, they can't quite identify it, but working with someone else, they can identify it. I think that's really good for rewarding the good role playing and building good team skills as well. So another thing as well is sometimes players don't know when to leave a scene. So the book suggests not just telling them to move on, because that kind of breaks the immersion, but to write the word scene on an index card and just show it to the players when they've kind of gathered all the relevant information from this scene. So in the book, they claim that makes the intrusion less jarring, although I have to say I've never tried this myself. So in horror movies, as we all know, the characters regularly, stupidly split up. But actually, in a lot of games, like Dungeons and Dragons and other fantasy role-playing games, they say, never split the party. But in horror role-playing games, it's actually better. You shouldn't be so attached to your character that you're afraid to kind of try anything, as we mentioned earlier in this video. But rather, splitting up can help you cover more ground, of course. And it's also kind of playing into the horror, and you'll be more isolated, you'll be on your own, and it's really much more immersive then. And you get to put the spotlight on one or two players and then kind of regularly switch over to the other group as well. The book advises that all players can observe the scene, but the absent characters don't know what's going on, which makes sense as well. Now, if you're doing this, you should keep the scenes short and snappy, because it can be boring for half of the group to only be watching for long stretches. And equally, when players are naturally a little bit cautious, and then when they break into smaller groups, they're even more cautious. So do make sure that interesting things are happening, even if the solo player or the small group is doing everything they can to be overly cautious. So, for example, if you go into the abandoned house and they're kind of like, they hear some things maybe going on in the basement, and they're like, I'm not going to go down there, then maybe something from the basement starts to come up to them as well. Because, again, the kind of the tension building up to it is great, but you don't want them to just be avoiding the horror completely. So, finally, where is it? Maybe just here. Yes. So, finally, there's just a small note about maintaining horror. So you don't want the players to become complacent or bored or to take it too lightly. Small amounts of comic relief are fine, but if the players are not taking it seriously, they're kind of like joking all about it, you feel free to up the horror and put them in danger. Use things from movies like jump scares, hallucinations, and dreams, and that will kind of keep that horror sense, because that's what we're coming together for in this role-playing system, which is a horror role-playing game. So you want there to be a good amount of horror. All right, so now I'll switch over and we will go through Midnight Sub Rosa, the start of it anyway. All right, see you there. So as previously mentioned, this adventure will follow the Armitage Inquiry campaign frame. See page 206 of the main rulebooks. So before running this, a keeper might get some good inspiration from the two stories Rats in the Walls and the Statement of Randolph Carter. And if you haven't read them, I'm pretty sure they are both in the public domain, but could I recommend something excellent to you instead? So here on the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society, they have something called Dark Adventure Radio Theatre. And if you haven't heard of it before, it's really, really excellent. I'll point out, I'm not getting any money or any affiliate links from this. I just think that the products are amazing. So they do dramatic readings of H.P. Lovecraft stories as if it were a radio production from the time. So they've kind of taken it from the script and turned it into kind of like a radio drama. The voice and the production quality is excellent, and it's really, really enjoyable. Especially, I know some people find reading the original H.P. Lovecraft stories just a little bit of a drag from time to time. Just quite wordy. Obviously, the themes are fantastic. But this is really, really entertaining to listen to. So here you can see there's a wide range of them as well. The Masks of Nyarlathotep one is just amazing. Do not listen to that if you're going to play the game. But if you've played it, or if you're a keeper, listen to that immediately. It is fantastic. So good. Anyway, there's one here for The Rats in the Wall, and you can get it, the audio CD with actual props as well. Maybe something like this. I'm not sure. I haven't got the props. Or you can just get the MP3 files as well. Now, they don't have a Dark Adventure radio theater for the Statement of Randolph Carter, but if you go to their website, you can just search for Randolph Carter and you'll come up with this. So this is actually just high quality readings by the same actors of H.P. Lovecraft stories. So they're not changing the script at all. They're just reading out his stories. So you can get a few different ones. The Selected Tales has all of these, which includes the Statement of Randolph Carter. And it's, Japanese prices. It's about $20. Okay. Or you can actually get the omnibus, which is everything, like all of the H.P. Lovecraft stories. Just looking at this website now, I just see, if you want to try this out, the Statement of Randolph Carter is completely free. The entire story. You can just click on it here and you can get it for free. Definitely check that out. It's really, really enjoyable, really high quality way of enjoying the H.P. Lovecraft stories. So again, I said we are going to be running the Armitage Inquiry campaign frame. And as part of this, the investigators will be sent to Rosa in Alabama to recover the diary of Ezekiel de la Poer. So he was an early colonist from France, and he was reportedly a necromancer, and he was eventually hanged in 1736, so 200 years before the present day, or the present day of the story. He was hanged for child abduction and child murder. He detailed all of his horrific acts in a diary which is kept in the University of Alabama Rare Books collection, but that has gone missing. So we get a little bit of advice here about how to run the game as a purist game, which kind of focuses more on unsettling horror, or if we want to run it as a pulp game, more pulpy action. And for the purist one, we should focus on the strangeness of Irma Darby. And for the pulp one, we should play up the gore and have a more violent finale. But basically, on the 200th anniversary of Delapour's execution, scholars are planning an academic discussion about him and his life. When the diary disappears from the library, the academics start to accuse each other of academic motives for this. That is, until the dead begin to rise. So what's really going on? The horrible truth here. Irma Darby is the main antagonist in the story, or in the adventure. She is a descendant of Delapour on her mother's side. Her fiance died, her father takes credit for her academic work, really, and her mother has just died. So she's a little bit down. She wants to learn Delapour's secrets to bring her mother back to life. And so she convinced her father to move back to their hometown, to his hometown of Rosa, which is where Delapour is from. She then dug up Delapour's body and rendered that and her mother's body into the essential salts, as per a copy of part of Delapour's journal. So she had a copy of that. She followed the process to, reduce them down to their essential salts. So after that, she tried to resurrect her mother in exchange for the life of a local farmer, Bill Mathers, but it didn't really work so well. It was unsuccessful, but it did start to draw attention from ghouls in the surrounding area. So Irma thinks that she has to have a stronger connection with her ancestor, such as having his actual journal, not just a copy of it. So she set up this academic gathering as a kind of a cover, and then she stole the journal. While she was studying the journal at night, she spilled some candle wax on it, and since then she has been hiding the journal in a secret pocket she's sewn into the inside of her dress. Then she started throwing suspicion at Professor Jack Starling, who she wants to be her patsy for all of this. She wants to quickly complete the spell before she's caught. Her first few attempts have not been great, but they have raised some dead townsfolk. And by the time the investigators arrive, she has developed the power to command the ghouls. And if she's not stopped, she will raise her mother, but also the necromancer Delapour. So now in the spine, this is the outline of the scenes to come. We also have a scene flow diagram here. It can look a little bit messy, but actually it does make sense. But I'll just read through this because it's quite short and succinct and concise. The investigators assemble at the Birmingham railway station for a briefing. So that's the start. Here you can see it. Their arrival in Rosa comes 2 days after the theft. So then arrival, that's going to be the next scene. Later on, we will see information about each individual scene, but this is just kind of the bird's eye view of it. A local posse member directs them to head straight to Sheriff Barnes's office. So again, that's going to be this scene over here. He's got a surprise in the makeshift morgue. So you can see meeting Sheriff Barnes leads to the makeshift morgue. After that, they may conduct a graveyard inspection. So again, from here, it might lead to here. Or they might want to interview the company entire. If the investigators wish, they can stay for supper and go through the house room by room, or they can start scouring the lodging house while their fellow lodgers are at supper. No matter what path they choose, when ghouls attack, Jack Starling will meet his fate. So this is going to happen kind of regardless of what the players do. It's just the next beat in the story. While exploring Rosa, investigators get a sense of the town's secrets and conflicts. Once they've completed preliminary inspections, they may join the townspeople while the dead are laid to rest. Again here. At some point, they may wish to speak with Roger Delapour about the curse he knows is in the blood. Clues eventually lead the investigators to the secret under the ash tree. Everything comes to a head when Irma attempts a daring resurrection under the moon. Will the investigators be prepared? So this is going to be really the big finale. There's a few other things that can lead from it, kind of cleaning up afterwards, but that's the big finale, really. Okay, so the main goal for the players is to retrieve the journal, and when they set out, their goal is to retrieve it and keep it safe, and maybe figure out what's going on. But once they figure out what's going on, they quickly realize they have to stop Irma from completing the ritual. And all of this might involve, they might have to make a decision, we actually have to destroy this journal. So before we go into the characters in the scene, we do get a little bit of information down here in this pop-out box, giving us a little bit of information on how to run the adventure. They say to think of it like a whodunit. And I would definitely recommend watching a few episodes of ITV's Poirot with David Suchet. It is amazing. Really, really great. If you can get your hands on that DVD set, I would get it definitely. I think if you're in England or Ireland, you can watch it on the ITV player. I'm not sure about that. Also, it's told we have a ticking clock. The players won't know about it at the start, but April 30th will be the day when Irma Darby wants to have the final resurrection. But we also have kind of like a daily clock as well here, where the sun sets about 7 p.m. and after that it will hamper a lot of the investigation. And then finally here we get a very nice timeline of the core events, even dating back to, he was born here. But mostly the ones from here. These are the only ones really that you'll need to know for the adventure. But if you want to, it says here as well, if you want to give your players a little bit more time, you could move a lot of these incidents back a day or two earlier, just to give them a little bit more investigative time. But don't think that they have to follow every little clue as well. They don't have to learn everything, just the core clues. Okay, so now we're going to be introduced to the three main characters, the ones with the biggest background that we get. Ezekiel Delapoire, the necromancer, Professor Theodore Darby, and his daughter, Irma Darby. So we do get some nice background information on the history of Delapoire, but it is not essential reading, but it's kind of useful to know it. The key points are he was a necromancer who was importing African slaves to work on his plantations, but some people started noticing he was buying them a little bit too quickly, too high a quantity. Basically, he was sacrificing them for his necromancy, figure out some magic anyway. In 1736, some children went missing, and this caused kind of a posse to form from the locals. They went to his plantation and found a disposal site with many child-sized bones. And after this, of course, they hanged him from the ancient ash tree beside his house, and he was buried underneath the tree. The house was then burned, and the slaves were auctioned off. But here, and I've highlighted it here, you can see, these are maybe the key points that I think are essential for you to read as well, because this is information that maybe the investigators, if they're trying to do some research into Delapoire, these are maybe some of the common ones that they might come up with. So the anthropology is saying that after Delapoire arrived in the region, some more indigenous inhabitants moved south, closer to the forts. And there's also a link here. Professor Katz is researching a theory that the two may be connected. If you look into history, you'll find that Walter Delapoire massacred the family's main English branch, and this is connected to the rats in the wall. If they try to do some occult research, Delapoire's name will appear on a list of white men who practiced voodoo, particularly zombification. Now, it might not be so clear. You can read a little bit more there. And then in the oral history, a local rumor said he had to leave France after he beat a peasant to death, resurrected the man, and made him continue farming until his body rotted. So after that, we read a little bit about Professor Theodore Darby, who is the father of Irma, and he has just retired from the University of Alabama. He stopped teaching about a decade ago and started collecting rare occult texts. His daughter helped a lot because of his failing eyesight. And he used to host academic gatherings for month-long salons in Rosa. So he wasn't living in Rosa, he was living up near the university. But the academics would gather in the summer for a month-long salon in Rosa. And this information is establishing that these gatherings are nothing out of the ordinary. It's something that they would regularly do. But after his wife, so Professor Theodore Darby, after his wife died in September 1935, he moved back to Rosa in November 1935. Irma Darby, so his daughter now, is a well-educated woman, having gone fully through college, but her father has been taking credit for her research more and more lately. She is very deferential and helpful in general, but if someone says something blatantly wrong, especially about her kind of specialist subjects, she will quickly change to a confident academic superiority and correct them on the matter. So that's kind of showing her true colors. So, just the connection between her and Delapoire is that when his house was raided and they hanged him, there was one girl left alive and rescued from the Delapoire mansion before it was burned down, and she claimed to be Delapoire's daughter. She kept her secrets about what had happened, but passed them down to her daughter, and then her daughter to her daughter, and on down the line like that. And it led to Sophie Cormier, I'm not sure, Irma's mother, who passed it down to the Irma here. Irma knew about her ancestry for a long time, but she only really became interested in it after the death of her fiance. And now she keeps the journal that she stole on her person. And so we get a sidebar here about ghouls, but just before we do that, I'll pop back up here, and there is a sidebar about race. So obviously Delapoire using African slaves for magical experiments is brutal. If your group is particularly sensitive to that topic, that might not need to come out in the talk in the play. I don't think it's essential information. I don't think it changes the story anyway. It could just be that he abducted children for which he was hanged. Not that I'm saying abducting and killing children is good, of course not, but you understand. However, the book here talks about judging how to play race, because when playing a historical game, obviously in 1930s Alabama, it wouldn't have been a very accepting place. So I'll just read this last paragraph here, which I think is very well written. For some groups, confronting the social climate of the time is an important part of historical role-playing. While the keeper might describe and role-play the sheriff or another character as openly hostile to a black investigator, for example, you don't need to use racial slurs in-game, and I would strongly advise against it. I don't think it adds anything, and I think it definitely detracts. Other groups might like to take a campaign character who's a retired black FBI agent into rural Alabama without having to encounter horrors which don't originate in the mythos. Many groups fall somewhere in the middle. It's best if keepers who don't know their players well deal with racism as written in the adventure. So, as written in the adventure, basically it won't be a major factor, but if your group really wants to go for more historical accuracy, which I think can be, enlightening as well, and it can kind of, if done well, it can kind of increase your understanding and your empathy for the situation as well. But if you play realistically, then it may be more difficult for black, gay, Asian, Jewish, Catholic, female investigators to interact with the locals. That's just something you might want to consider. But in general, I would advise against it, and especially for your first time game, I would go pretty easy on the racial stuff as well. But yeah, you'll judge best from your own group. So then, finally, we get some information on Ghouls, and most of it is so good. So you can see I highlighted a lot of it, and we'll just kind of check that out. Here, you can see that they have their snouts, rubbery skin, and pointed ears. This is something that you can use to describe to the players rather than just saying ghouls. Because if you just say some ghouls pop out, then it's bringing up all the images that people have of ghouls already. Whereas this wants to be kind of like an unknown horror. So describing them kind of viscerally is better than just giving them a name. So then we have little bits of information here as well. Ghoul warrens riddle North America. The major colonies live below large burial grounds, and we know Delapoire killed a lot of slaves. But most ghoul colonies form spontaneously, but a sorcerer, Delapoire, who pays the charnel price, may lure servitor ghouls to a region. So if you're kind of killing enough people, the ghouls might serve you as well. Most of the ghouls the investigators encounter are from the Birmingham colony. After Delapuer's death, the town's population could not support a warren, so they kind of moved away. But now Irma's actions are starting to draw them back. So now ancient ghouls who may have served Delapuer before his death and their spawn who still feel the pull of his family's power have returned to this warren. It's important to maintain a certain air of mystery if the investigators have not encountered ghouls before. Focus on unnerving elements, their rubbery skin, the foul odor, the canine features, rather than revealing that the creatures are ghouls. So just what I said before there. The keeper will find Hideous Creatures, Ghouls by Kenneth Haidt, a useful supplement for ghoul mythology, description, and role-playing flourishes. So I just want to talk about that a little bit. I would advise, as a first-time keeper for Trail of Cthulhu, just use the material available here. The point of New Game Master Month program is not to overload yourself with reading books and books on lore and background. However, if you do want to learn a little bit more about ghouls, the supplement that they recommend here is fantastic. So you can find it, if you're looking for it, in two forms. You can find it as the standalone Ghouls supplement, which is 12 pages long. Or you can get the combined collection of all the different Hideous Creature supplements in a single book called Hideous Creatures. So it's, the prices are in pounds because Pelgrane Press is a UK business. But there is some really, really amazing information here. It gives you different ways. I'll just pop it up now for a second. So here we go. So it gives you different ways to portray ghouls, different abilities and combat abilities they might have, connections to different countries, various kind of scenario plot ideas revolving around ghouls. And it also gives you a very nice bibliography down at the end. Right down, you can see so much information just about ghouls. Here's a bibliography where it kind of lists where ghouls have appeared or kind of maybe appeared in the mythos books before. So we've got Lovecraft, we've got Clark Ashton Smith, we've also got some more modern ones here as well, and you know, slightly different takes on them. Also, we saw here in the main Trail of Cthulhu rulebook that when the players go for investigation, we found little snippets on what they might find about if they look for evidence collection, forensics, languages, and sense trouble in connection to ghouls. And that's very nice. But in Hideous Creatures, it expands upon it so much. This is now expanded to, so you can see all of these: library use, medicine, occult, oral history, physics, photography, streetwise, theology. It's actually there for 32 different skills that they might try to use. It is amazing. Now, so all of these, they will not be necessary at all for this scenario. But I do recommend checking out this excellent book, Hideous Creatures, at some point, because, and I'll just show you the table of contents as well. Here are the different creatures that they go into. So Bat Things, Bowl, Black Winged Ones, Biaki, Color Out of Space, Dark Young of Shub Niggurath, the Deep Ones, Elder Things, Flying Polyps, Gaseous Wraiths, Ghouls, Great Race of Yith, Hounds of Tindalos, Hunting Horrors, Loiger, probably saying that wrong, sorry, Medusas, the Migo, Moonbeast, Nightgaunts, Raktajiva, Rat Things, Serpent Folk, Shoggoths, Spawn of Yogg-Sothoth, Star Vampires, Cho-Cho, Ultraviolent, Devourer, Vampirish Vapor, Wendigo, Worm Cultist, Yimby, New Horrors for Old, and that's it. So, and all of them have so much information. So links will be in the description below. And again, they're not affiliate links. I'm just trying to share the good stuff with you. P.S. You can also get these at Drive-Thru RPG, but they're a little bit cheaper if you buy them directly from Pelgrane Press. So, where am I? Yes. So that is the core information about Midnight Sub Rosa. After that, we are recommended, that's all we have to do for this week, for this task. But after that, we're recommended to just kind of flick briefly through the scenes. So I'll leave that for you to do for now. And I imagine we'll be looking at them more closely next week. Okay, so that is everything for today. I hope you're getting excited about running this great adventure for this really interesting, excellent game system. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye!